Have you ever paused, amidst the bustling rhythm of life, to truly consider the profound journey of aging? It's not just about the passage of years or the shifting landscapes of our bodies. It's a deeply personal exploration, a time of reflection, transformation, and the quiet acceptance of life's inevitable cycles. You may have found yourself wondering, what does it truly mean to age with grace, with purpose, and with a sense of fulfillment, when it feels as though the world around us is constantly changing? What if I told you that the later years of life, often seen as a period of decline, can be a time of profound growth, unexpected joy, and the deepest connections that we may ever experience? That within those challenges of aging, there also lie hidden opportunities for discovering inner strengths, building a greater level of self-awareness, and a new appreciation of all that we hold dear. Today, we are not just talking about getting older, we are exploring a journey, and we are choosing to do so with intention, curiosity, and an unwavering commitment to discovering what it means to live life to its fullest at all stages of our existence. It's about exploring the unspoken questions, the quiet yearnings of the heart, and about understanding that as we move through time, we also grow in wisdom and in the capacity to embrace the true essence of life. To begin, I want to introduce you to Jack Thompson, a 62-year-old man whose story is both deeply personal and also a reflection of the universal experiences that so many of us face as we grow older. Jack's life has been marked by the beautiful tapestry of joys, of love, of success, but also by heartaches, loss, and those difficult questions that often linger in the quiet moments of our lives. From the profound loss of his beloved wife, Sarah, to the growing sense of isolation as his children built their own lives, Jack's experience has been both challenging and illuminating, and he represents the shared experience that so many of us navigate throughout our own journey of aging. It is a journey that takes a different shape for all of us, but it often holds very similar challenges, and it is by acknowledging these common threads that we can also feel less alone in our own struggles. And while Jack's journey is his own, its themes of loneliness, loss, and the search for meaning and connection will resonate with all of us as we all navigate the shifting terrain of our own later years and face these often unavoidable complexities that can sometimes feel incredibly overwhelming and disempowering. It's about finding our way, and also about finding our way with compassion, understanding, and an open heart. And I want you to know that today, we are not here to offer you quick fixes or easy answers. We are here to explore a journey of human experience that can be complex, that can be both joyful and also sorrowful. What I hope is that you will find solace in these shared experiences, and that you will begin to see your own lives reflected in the stories of others, so that you can find connection, support, and inspiration along the way. And that brings us to an important question. Why should you stick around and watch this video until the very end? The truth is, Jack's experiences are not unique. They are a reflection of all the very things that many of us will inevitably face as we grow older. And within his story, you will find valuable insights and strategies that you can immediately use in your own lives. It is a guide that is designed to support you, encourage you, and also to empower you to take control of your own future. As we trace Jack's journey, you will learn how to cope with loss, find new connections, and build a fulfilling and meaningful life even in the midst of solitude. You will discover the invaluable wisdom he gained from his relationship with Laura, a woman who entered his life in unexpected ways and also helped him navigate those complexities of aging with strength, resilience, and grace. It is also about acknowledging that life may not always work out as we expect it to, and that often, it is in these unexpected places that we find some of our greatest sources of love and support. And Jack's story also shines a light on some of the difficult choices that seniors often have to make, such as the decision to move into a nursing home, which can often be filled with guilt, shame, and a sense of loss. We will explore how you can approach these challenges with greater peace, confidence, and with an open heart, knowing that you are choosing a path that is aligned with your needs and that also honors the lives of those you love, as they embark on their own unique paths. And finally, by the end of this exploration, you will walk away with a deeper understanding of how to cherish the relationships that truly matter most to you, to embrace your own unique brand of independence, and to take full control of your life, no matter what obstacles you may face. It is about understanding that you are worthy, that you are capable, and that you have the power to make choices that will positively impact your future. Whether you are in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, Jack's story will undoubtedly inspire you to make the most of your later years and to know that you can live a life that is full of meaning and purpose. And it is also about understanding that aging is a journey, not a destination, and that even though there may be moments of pain, sorrow, or difficulty, they can also be moments of profound growth and a deeper understanding of all that life has to offer. It is a truly worthwhile journey to explore, and we are here at Vibrant Seniors to support you in every step of your path. This is a space where you can find inspiration, support, and empowerment, and where you will find a community that is also dedicated to making the most of this incredible journey of aging, so that you can embrace all that life has to offer with grace, with joy, and with a deep and abiding sense of inner strength. And I hope you are ready to dive in and to see just how powerfully transformative this story can truly be. Jack's story begins with a dream, a vision of retirement as a time to relax, to enjoy the fruits of his labor, and to finally embrace all the things that he had planned for his future, meticulously saving and working for a day when he would finally have more time to pursue the things he had long set aside. He had planned it carefully, methodically, and with an unwavering belief that the future would eventually come, as he knew it should. And like so many people, his life was turned upside down by an unexpected curveball, a change in circumstances that forced him to face an entirely new reality. He had to retire earlier than he had anticipated, and while thankfully his financial planning gave him the comfort and security he needed, he was now forced to confront the reality of how his life had changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was prepared financially, but he was not yet prepared for the profound emotional challenges that would come next. He had always been mindful of his spending, keeping a tight grip on his finances and diligently saving for those unforeseen circumstances, and while this provided a level of security, it also left him with an emptiness that could not be solved with money, and that could not be understood until he was in the midst of it. And it was in that quiet emptiness that he began to realize that, despite his planning, there was an important factor that had not been considered, that of love and human connection. It's a reminder that planning alone is never enough, and that we must also acknowledge that we cannot control all of the different elements of our lives, and that we must also make space for the unexpected and to be prepared for those curves that life often throws our way. And it is in these unexpected moments that we are often taught our most powerful lessons, and that we are given the opportunity to create an even more beautiful and resilient story for ourselves. The financial security that Jack had so meticulously planned for was a source of comfort, but it did little to fill the heavy silence that had now become a constant companion in his life. There was a time when his family had been his whole world, and the house had been filled with the love, the laughter, and the warmth of his wife and his children, and yet all of that now seemed like a distant memory, a far-off dream. His son, Adam, and his daughter, Emily, both now had their own families and their own responsibilities and their own lives to lead. They were stable, they were flourishing, and they were doing what they were meant to do, and while he was deeply proud of them, a part of him also longed for those days when the house had been filled with so much activity, with so much life, and with so much love. But those days were gone, and he was now forced to face a new reality. Over time, the house had grown quieter, the energy that had once filled it had slowly begun to dissipate, leaving behind an emptiness that echoed with every step that he took. And he also began to experience a sense of loss for all of his plans and all the expectations that he had for his own life. This wasn't just about the house, it was about his heart, it was about the family that he loved, and it was about the loss of a world that he once thought would last forever. A few years prior, his beloved wife, Sarah, had passed away after a long and courageous battle with illness, and that loss had left a void in his heart that no amount of time seemed capable of healing, and that absence had become a constant presence in every corner of his home. He was not only alone, but also reminded of all of the beautiful things that he had lost along the way. As time passed, Jack's children, who had once been so close, slowly became more absorbed in their own busy lives, with their families, with their careers, and with all of the various responsibilities that come with building their futures. They visited less and less, and while he understood and accepted that this was a natural progression, he couldn't help but also feel the pang of loneliness that started to settle in his heart, slowly, but surely, with every passing day. He recognized that they had their own lives to live, their own dreams to pursue, and that he couldn't and shouldn't expect them to always be at his side. However, he also couldn't help but feel the sting of their growing absence. It was as if his world was slowly fading into the background, and that he was being left behind to navigate this chapter all on his own. It was a feeling that was both confusing and also incredibly painful. He tried to suppress those difficult feelings and to focus on all the good things in his life, but it was often difficult to find joy when the house was so often filled with a crushing and overwhelming silence. It's important to acknowledge that often the greatest challenges come in those quiet moments, when we feel like we have nowhere to hide, and when we are forced to face all of our fears and insecurities in a very real and very meaningful way. And that is what Jack began to experience, an ache of loneliness that seemed to deepen with every passing day, creating an emotional wound that no amount of self-soothing or logic could ever seem to heal. He was not only adjusting to his new life, but he was also adjusting to the loss of a chapter, the loss of a time when he had felt surrounded by so much love, and a feeling that his new life, his new reality, was something that he had not yet fully come to terms with. One afternoon, Jack found himself sitting on the sofa, surrounded by the stillness of his empty house, and he felt as though the silence seemed to swallow him whole. He could hear nothing but the beating of his own heart, the distant hum of the world outside, and it felt as though the rooms that had once been filled with life and warmth now seemed to echo the loneliness that he felt within. It was a physical feeling, as though the walls were closing in and he was being crushed by an invisible force. It was in that moment that he felt deep within his bones, a pang of bitterness that he could no longer ignore, a feeling that he had worked his entire life to provide for his family, and that, in his old age, he was simply left to face all the quiet and the emptiness alone. He tried to push those difficult feelings aside, as we often try to do, but that day they refused to budge. They had taken root in his heart, and they were not going to be so easily ignored. And it was then that the phone rang, and it was his son Adam. But instead of the comfort and connection that he had so desperately longed for, he heard only a voice that was both urgent and hurried, and as Adam explained that he may not be able to come by, due to the demands of work, he could feel the pain of disappointment creep into his heart. Jack knew that Adam had a family, a career, and all of those various responsibilities that must take his time and his energy, and he did not want to burden his son with his loneliness. So he responded with a forced calmness, telling him that everything was fine, that he did not need to worry, that he had everything under control, while in reality, the words felt empty even as they left his lips. And the truth was, he was feeling anything but okay. He hung up, feeling a hollow ache deep inside him and feeling as if the world had simply slipped away, leaving him in this place of quiet and painful solitude. And then, as he tried to calm his racing heart, the question that often plagues us in those most vulnerable moments began to haunt his thoughts. What will I do if I am truly left alone? The following day, Jack's neighbor, John, stopped by for a visit. And while John was someone he had long known and enjoyed speaking with, there was a new unspoken heaviness that seemed to be present this time, as though they were both carrying the same burden, and both trying to understand what to do about it. After a few moments of polite conversation, a deep silence descended that was heavy with all of the things that were left unsaid. John then turned to Jack, his eyes carefully scanning the empty room, and said with a heavy sigh, "So, it's just you here now, huh?" And in that moment, both Jack and John understood the magnitude of what this implied. Their homes had once been filled with love, warmth, and activity, and now they were just filled with a quiet that echoed the loneliness that each of them felt deep within their hearts. And it was in that silence that Jack realized that he was not alone in navigating these difficult emotions. John continued, his voice now tinged with the kind of sorrow that only comes from shared experiences. "Same for me. My wife is busy, and the kids are doing their own thing." His words echoed Jack's deepest fears and the painful truth that he had tried so hard to deny. It was a reminder that many of us, particularly as we age, begin to experience the deep ache of loneliness that often comes with that sense of feeling as though you are being left behind. And those words about feeling alone at this stage of life were like a cold, hard truth that Jack could not escape, and the emptiness that he had felt only days before now seemed to be mirrored in his new friend. It was then that John asked the question, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You have to think about it. What if one day you're all alone?" And those words, that question, cut to Jack's very core, and as he felt his heart drop into his stomach, the thought of being completely alone in his house, with no one to talk to, and no one to check in on him, filled him with a very real and very tangible dread. It wasn't just about being physically alone, it was also about the fear of emotional isolation and a sense of vulnerability that he had not acknowledged before. And while he had always been perfectly comfortable with his own company, the thought of being totally alone, with no one at all to connect with, was deeply terrifying. John's question lingered with him, repeating over and over in his mind, and as it did, the reality of his loneliness seemed to grow, becoming more real and more overwhelming, and he knew that he could not simply sit and wait for the worst to happen. He tried to shake it off, to dismiss it, and to carry on with his daily routine, but the weight of it was undeniable, and he knew that something had to change, that he simply could not continue to live a life that was so isolating and lonely. A few days later, Jack's daughter, Emily, came by with her son, Noah, but again, she barely had any time to even sit down before she began to rush off, back to her responsibilities, back to the various tasks of her daily life, all of which were also of importance. He tried to hide the ache in his chest, he tried to smile, but his attempts at reassurance felt empty, and he knew that this was not what he wanted his life to look like. He stood at the door, watching them leave, the sound of their footsteps slowly fading away, and the house once again felt even emptier. It was then that he could no longer ignore the tears that welled up in his eyes, the grief that was threatening to overwhelm him, and the profound and overwhelming sense of abandonment that settled so heavily in his heart. He knew that he could not go on living this life, drifting through his days in such a quiet and lonely existence. He had to do something, he had to find a way to break free, and he had to find a path that would lead him to a more fulfilling and meaningful life. It was then that he knew that if he did not choose to change his habits, if he didn't choose to act with intention, the silence would begin to swallow him whole, and that if he didn't try, he might slowly disappear completely. He had to act now, before the loneliness became more than he could ever bear, and with that, he embarked on a new path, a new way of seeing his life, and a new approach to taking responsibility for his own well-being. It was a call to action, a call to change, and a call to reclaim his life, and to begin a new chapter that would ultimately lead him towards a path of joy, hope, and inspiration. A few days later, Jack met up with John at the park for a walk, and as they sat on the bench watching other people go by, it felt as though they were now observing the world from a different perspective, through the wisdom of their own experiences and their own unique awareness. It was time to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths and to begin the process of truly taking responsibility for the life that they were now living. Jack turned to John, his heart heavy with all of the burdens that had been weighing on him, and he said, with a trembling voice, "You were right about everything. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at our age, if we are left alone, how do we manage?" And John responded with a nod of understanding, his eyes soft with empathy. He'd been there, he understood, and he knew that they had to face these truths head-on. John then spoke with a level of firmness that surprised Jack, and with a new level of confidence that suggested that he had also been doing some thinking. There are a few things we need to prepare for in advance. We can't wait until the last moment to worry, he said, his voice steady, and with a note of reassurance that helped to soothe Jack's worries. It was as if he was no longer simply reacting to the world, but rather he was now choosing to navigate it with more purpose and with greater intention. And the first thing that they both agreed on was that they needed to have financial security, that it was essential to have enough savings to cover their basic needs so that they would not be left struggling or being burdened by a constant fear that they would no longer be able to take care of themselves. While money does not fix every problem, it can provide a strong foundation from which you can begin to build a life that is both comfortable and also secure, and a feeling of stability in an often chaotic world. And while Jack had always prided himself on being responsible with his money, he knew that he had to begin to make new plans for what the future may hold, taking into account all of the unexpected expenses, the sudden emergencies, and the unpredictable changes that seem to always arise at the most inconvenient times. It was about choosing a pathway that was both secure and also self-reliant, and about taking responsibility for his financial well-being. John then continued, "Without a spouse or kids nearby, it's up to us to take care of ourselves." And these words resonated deeply with Jack, as he felt that truth like a sting in his heart, a realization that he had often placed the responsibility for his own well-being into the hands of other people, and now it was up to him to take full control. It was a hard truth, but it was a reality that they both faced, and therefore it was a reality that they both had to accept. And while it was comforting to have the support and care from loved ones, it was now time for Jack to acknowledge that he had to become more self-reliant, and that it was up to him to create a life that would not only be meaningful, but also one that would support him for many years to come. It was not just about financial security. It was also about emotional security, and it was about taking ownership of his own well-being and choosing to navigate his future with greater awareness and intention. Jack knew that he could not control all of the circumstances in his life, but he could always choose how he responded, and that by choosing to be proactive about his own care, he was also making a commitment to his own health, his own happiness, and his own sense of peace. And while it may be tempting to give up when life seems overwhelming, you are the only one who can choose to live it fully and to embrace the responsibility of creating a future that brings you joy. And finally, it was also important to choose a path that was not just about self-reliance, but also a path that did not include isolation. And it was then that Jack knew that he could not simply stay home, but that he had to choose to actively participate in his own life. And John also continued to highlight that they should both strive to remain as active as possible and to find opportunities to connect with others, ensuring that they never allowed themselves to sink into a cycle of isolation and loneliness. These words seemed to echo deep within Jack, as he recognized that he had, for far too long, let his life narrow down to the confines of his own home, his television screen, and those repetitive tasks that brought so little meaning or purpose. He knew that it was time to change his habits, it was time to embrace self-care, and it was time to choose a pathway that would lead him out of the darkness and into a brighter, more hopeful future. And so, Jack decided to make a conscious choice to change his habits and to embark on a new way of life, no matter how daunting it might seem at first. He knew that his health and his happiness depended on this decision, and he knew that he had to act now before the loneliness completely consumed him. His first step was to establish a simple, yet incredibly powerful new routine that involved small steps towards re-engaging with the world. Each morning, Jack began walking to the park, just a short distance, but also a powerful action and a step towards regaining control over his life. He did not push himself to walk further than he was comfortable, but instead, he focused on making the walk a regular and consistent part of his daily routine. It was about choosing to move, It was about engaging with the outside world, and it was about creating momentum towards positive change. And then, in the evenings, he found solace in the local community center, playing chess and chatting with other seniors who were navigating similar challenges. At first, it felt awkward, and the weight of loneliness still tried to pull him back into his shell, but little by little, he began to build new friendships, and he could feel his life becoming richer, more fulfilling, and also more connected. It was about recognizing that we all have a need for human interaction, and that we must seek those connections wherever we can find them. These new routines, these new commitments, and these new relationships helped him begin to heal and to move through his day with a greater sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation of all that he had to be grateful for. And while it was by no means perfect, he was beginning to see that it was a pathway out of loneliness and a path that would help him to live a more fulfilled and balanced life. He had chosen to step away from that feeling of isolation and to step into a world that was filled with hope and a powerful sense of possibility. However, despite all of these new activities, new routines, and the new connections that he was making, there was a gnawing emptiness that refused to disappear completely. It was that quiet longing for companionship that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day, a feeling that no amount of outside activities was able to fully address. He knew that his loneliness was not going to simply vanish, and that it would require a deeper sense of self-awareness and a new commitment to exploring the next chapter of his life. Every night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the same questions would repeat in his mind over and over. Who will be there for me when I am sick, when I need someone to talk to, or when I am struggling to navigate the inevitable challenges that come with getting older? And those questions also highlighted the reality that he was still struggling with the loss of his wife, Sarah, and all of the other relationships that had shaped his life. The silence in his room seemed to amplify those fears, making him feel even more isolated and vulnerable. He realized that he could not continue to simply live alone. He needed something more, someone more, and he couldn't simply bury those feelings. He had to address them and find a way to navigate them with greater understanding and awareness. It was time to ask a new set of questions and to explore new possibilities that he had once thought were impossible. And while he had always been content to live alone, he now felt that maybe, just maybe, what he truly needed was someone by his side, not to take care of him, but simply to be there, to share the quiet moments and to share in the burdens of getting older. But that realization also brought with it a wave of guilt and doubt, as he wondered if it would be a betrayal of Sarah's memory to seek companionship again, or if it was somehow inappropriate to seek another form of love after all that he had experienced. And while those feelings were complex and confusing, they also highlighted the very real human need for connection and for love that we all experience at all stages of life. He could no longer ignore this ache for companionship. He had to address it, and to begin to take steps toward a life that would be filled with both self-sufficiency and also human connection. And while his past had a strong hold on him, he also needed to make room for new love to enter his life. And, after much hesitation, Jack finally gathered the courage to speak with his old friend, John, and to share his most private and personal thoughts, as John had, before him, created a space where vulnerability was welcome. And when Jack shared his heart, John listened with a knowing look in his eyes, his silence speaking volumes, and he could see that John understood the depth of his struggles and that he also honored the complexity of his journey. He was not alone in this. And then John spoke, his voice filled with compassion. "I get it," he said softly. "After my wife passed, I felt the same way. We don't need someone to depend on, but someone to talk to, someone to share the highs and lows of life with." It was that last part, those gentle words about companionship, that gave Jack such a profound sense of comfort, a sense of acknowledgement, and a feeling that he was truly being seen. It was okay to want someone to share the joys and sorrows of this life, and that while that may take different forms throughout the course of our lives, it was never wrong to seek that out. He also recognized that he was not looking for someone to replace Sarah, but simply to ease the ache of solitude that had slowly been growing inside him, and that he had been desperately trying to deny. He knew in that moment that it was okay to want more, that it was okay to open his heart, and that it was okay to make space for a new kind of love that would support him, uplift him, and give him a sense of peace. And then, it was as though life was responding to that new openness, and it was at this point that Jack met Margaret, a woman who also lived alone, but who also possessed a vibrant and optimistic personality that was like a breath of fresh air to him. It is as though the universe has heard his plea and had led her to him at that perfect moment. Their initial interactions were often playful, and they were also filled with warmth and understanding, as it became quickly clear that they had a deep and powerful bond that was based on shared experiences and also a deep sense of empathy. They bonded over their shared experiences of living far from their children and the deep loneliness that often accompanied this specific challenge. And while their circumstances were similar, their personalities were quite different, and it was that difference that served as a beautiful complement to each other, creating a bond that was both unique and incredibly powerful. He was drawn to her warmth, her laughter, and her natural ability to find joy in even the smallest of things, something he had begun to forget in his own life. Margaret had a spirit of adventure and a zest for life that he hadn't felt in years, and she was always out exploring new places and also doing activities that reminded Jack of how much he had been missing out on, and she served as a subtle reminder that his life was still worth living. And the best part, her presence brought a new sense of joy back into his life, and their conversations, filled with laughter and understanding, became something that he looked forward to every single day. It was in those conversations and in those shared moments that he felt that, perhaps, he had finally been released from his prison of loneliness. As their relationship deepened, their lives began to intertwine in unexpected and beautiful ways, as their quiet moments together became something that they both cherished, and when they were apart, they felt as though something was missing. They began to do more together, grocery shopping, cooking meals, taking walks in the park, and they were simply enjoying each other's company and the simple rhythm of two lives intertwined. And though their connection had no particular label, it did not need one, because the bond they shared was, in itself, more than enough. It was a bond built on compassion, kindness, and genuine care. And though they never truly defined it, Margaret had become Jack's companion in every sense of the word, and his home, which had once felt so utterly empty, was now filled with a new kind of warmth, with conversation, and with a very comforting rhythm of two lives that were now intertwined. And the emptiness that had once defined his life had now slowly and gently been replaced with something far more meaningful, something he had not even known he was missing. He realized that the companionship they shared wasn't about replacing what he had lost, but about finding a new kind of love, one that was quiet, steady, and incredibly comforting. It wasn't the passionate love of youth, but it was a love that brought peace, security, and a gentle warmth into the twilight of his life, and that provided a sense of connection that he had not thought was possible. It was a new kind of love, but a love that was still powerful, transformative, and most importantly, that was always supportive of his needs. Margaret had slowly and gently become a light that had pierced through his darkness, reminding him that even in old age, we do not have to be alone, and that we all deserve to experience human connection, and that when we open our hearts, we allow ourselves to find those connections in unexpected places. There was nothing that had to be forced or hurried. It simply unfolded in a way that was natural, organic, and true. And, as he settled into this new routine, he also began to understand that there was room in his heart for new love, for new connections, and for new experiences, without it taking away from the love that he had previously shared. It was a gift, a reminder that his life was still beautiful, that his heart was still open, and that it was never too late to embrace all that this world has to offer. It is time to truly live. However, as time went on, the complexities of life began to unfold once again, and to test the strength of the bond that Jack and Margaret had built together. And while they had created a beautiful and loving life for themselves, they were also about to face an unexpected challenge that would test their ability to adapt to change and their capacity to support each other through times of transition. Life always has a way of testing us, and it's by passing through those tests that we grow even stronger. One day, as Jack was quietly going about his routine, as he often did, Margaret received a phone call that would shift the entire course of her future, and that, while joyful, would also create a new layer of challenges that they had to face together. It was her son, her beloved child, who was getting married, and who had asked her to come and live with him and his new family. Her son needed her, but Margaret had built a life with Jack, and it was time to see how strong those bonds truly were. When Margaret shared the news with Jack, it was as though a surge of bitterness had flooded his heart, and though he tried to keep his emotions in check and to appear outwardly supportive, he couldn't fully mask the deep sadness that was slowly consuming him. It was like a repeat of the past, where his family had slowly moved away from him, leaving him alone once again, and he was terrified of falling back into that dark place of solitude. But this time, he had to respond with grace and with a level of understanding that would not only support him, but also Margaret. He did not want to be a barrier to her son's happiness and to her own happiness, and while his heart was breaking, he knew that he had to put her needs before his own, and that he had to make space for her to make the best choices for herself, and to choose a path that was in alignment with her own dreams, her own values, and her own unique experiences. He was being tested, and he had to respond with courage, compassion, and the best version of himself that he could possibly be. As Margaret shared her son's invitation, Jack could see the internal battle waging within her, the pull of family, and also that powerful bond that they had built with one another, and he could hear that tremor in her voice that betrayed her emotions. "But I've gotten used to being here with you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, those few words hanging in the air like an unspoken plea. He knew that she was torn between the joy of family and the quiet intimacy of their life together, a life that had become a source of comfort, security, and deep and abiding love. And Jack knew at that moment that he had to be strong, and that he had to be the one to make this decision easier for her. So, taking a deep breath, he attempted to steady his thoughts, knowing that he needed to speak from a place of kindness and compassion, rather than from a place of selfishness or despair. He had to honor her needs and allow her to choose a pathway that was aligned with her own values. "You need to be with your son," he said, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "As a mother, that's where you belong. And I'll be fine here on my own, don't worry about me." And while he did not know if those words were actually true, or if they were something that he had desperately wanted to believe, he needed her to hear them. He needed to put her needs above his own, and he also needed to reassure her that it was okay to choose a path that would ultimately lead her away from him. It was an act of love, an act of kindness, and also an act of selflessness. But deep inside, the weight of those words felt like a heavy stone lodged in his chest, and even as he spoke, he could also feel the crushing sadness that was starting to consume him. He wanted her to stay, he wanted to hold on to the warmth and comfort of their shared life, and he was terrified of being alone again, but he knew that this was what she needed to do, and he would not do anything to hold her back from the happiness and fulfillment that she so richly deserved. After several days of quiet contemplation, Margaret made the difficult decision to return to her son, a decision that, while both logical and wise, was nonetheless one that filled them both with a range of difficult emotions. And as she made her preparations to leave, Jack could feel his heart slowly begin to break, and he began to anticipate, with a growing sense of dread, the silence that would soon descend once again. It was a sense of déjà vu, and a feeling that all that he had gained would soon be taken from him once more. Jack drove her to the bus stop, his heart a mixture of love, sadness, and also a deep sense of resignation, knowing that he had to allow her to embark on this new chapter of her life, even though he also knew that he would be left with an ache that was incredibly profound. And as he watched her board the bus and slowly begin to move away from him, he felt as though a piece of his heart was being left behind, and that a part of him would remain in that space with her always. And as the bus pulled away, Jack stood there frozen, feeling as though the world around him had suddenly gone silent, leaving him in a hollow emptiness. And as he drove back to his now empty house, the silence was deafening, and it was an emptiness that he had not anticipated, a feeling that was far more profound and overwhelming than he had ever imagined. It was a loneliness that hit him hard, an understanding that he was now navigating this chapter entirely on his own. It was in this silent ride home that he began to truly grapple with the reality of what many elderly people are forced to face: solitude and the terrifying fear of being alone in our later years, and he could feel his resolve beginning to falter and his hope starting to dwindle. It was a moment of profound sadness, and also a moment where the truth of his situation finally took hold, and where he understood that he could no longer ignore the reality of his increasingly solitary life. And upon returning to his now empty house, the silence was deafening, and it was a loneliness that he had not anticipated, a feeling that was more profound than he could have ever imagined. It was as if all the light and warmth had suddenly been extinguished, leaving him in an overwhelming darkness. And the thought of being completely alone in his later years began to seep into his mind, causing a sense of dread that he could no longer suppress. It was an emotion that he had been carefully avoiding, and that now came with a tidal force. And with that, tears welled up in his eyes as he muttered to himself, struggling to make sense of the void that had now overtaken him, his entire existence, and his entire approach to life. The departure of Margaret had left behind an enormous hole that nothing seemed able to fill, and while his friends and his family tried to offer comfort, no words were able to ease the burden that he was now carrying and that he could no longer ignore. He had once been so sure of his ability to live alone, but now, after experiencing the joy and the intimacy of sharing his life with someone else, he was no longer certain of how he could go on in this way. And then, it was as if an idea had sparked in his mind, a potential solution to his loneliness, a light at the end of what had become a long and dark tunnel. And this light came through an overheard conversation which had been happening at the community center just a few days earlier. And as he remembered the conversation about the possibility of moving into a nursing home, it struck him with a sudden force, and he began to understand that, perhaps, this was the answer. Maybe this was the place where he could find peace, security, and some form of connection and companionship. And it was with that thought in his heart that he knew he had to speak to his family about it, and he had to be prepared to explain to them why he had chosen this unexpected path. The next day, Jack called his son, Adam, and with a calm voice, he explained to him his desire to move into a nursing home. He had anticipated that it would be a difficult conversation, and he knew that his children would be concerned, but he also had to be honest about what he truly felt and what he truly needed. And while that was difficult for him, he also knew that it was the only way to make an informed decision that was aligned with his best interests and his unique values. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Adam spoke, and Jack could sense the worry in his son's voice, a tremor that made his heart tighten. "Dad, are you sure you want to move into a nursing home?" he asked, his voice filled with both concern and also a slight hesitation. "Doesn't that place feel cold?" And with that question, Jack understood that his son did not yet fully comprehend the depth of the loneliness that he had been experiencing. Jack knew that Adam was trying to understand and to support him, but that he could not do so from the comfort of his own life and his own daily routines. Adam had his family, his responsibilities, and a completely different perspective on what it meant to live well. But Jack had to be firm, he had to make his choices from a place of strength, and he had to choose a path that he truly believed was right for him. So he responded calmly, with a gentle honesty, "Adam, it's not about the coldness, it's about finding a place where I can truly be at peace for the long term. You and Emily have your own busy lives, and I don't want to be a burden to you. At least in a nursing home, there are other people around. I won't be so alone." His words were spoken with a sense of resignation, but also a powerful sense of self-determination. Jack knew that his decision was both difficult and complex, and that while his intentions were pure and were born out of a desire for a greater sense of peace and connection, they were also born out of a deep sense of loneliness and also an increasing awareness of his own mortality. He had lived a life of purpose, and now it was up to him to design a future where he could continue to live that life in a way that was sustainable, effective, and also aligned with his needs. Adam hesitated, and Jack could hear the worry in his voice as he promised to discuss it with Emily, and it was then that Jack understood that this was not just a choice that he was making for himself, but it was a decision that would also impact his children and their lives as well. And while he had always tried to ensure that he was being as supportive as possible to his children's journeys, this time he needed their support, and he needed their love to truly navigate his next step. A few days later, they came over, sitting on the sofa, their faces drawn with worry, and they were so clearly concerned for him, and they wanted to make sure that he had truly considered all of the available options, and also that this was a choice that he was not making from a place of desperation or fear. Emily was the first to speak, her voice thick with emotion. "Dad, we understand that it's hard for you to be on your own, but are you sure a nursing home is the right place? What if you feel even more isolated there?" she asked, her voice full of concern and also of fear. It was in that moment that Jack could feel the love from his children, and that they were always there for him, even if they were unable to fully comprehend the choices he had to make, and he knew that it was their concern that had them hesitant, and that, ultimately, they also knew that they must support him in whatever he felt was the best path for his own life and overall well-being. And while those questions and worries were all valid, Jack had already made his decision, and he had made it with purpose, with clarity, and also with a sense of peace that he had not felt in a long time. He looked at his children and tried to communicate to them as gently as possible that he had done all of the hard work. He had considered all of his options, and this decision was the one that he felt would bring him the greatest sense of peace. "You don't need to worry about me," Jack said, his voice now stronger and filled with a sense of self-assurance that he had not previously possessed. "I've thought this through. I need a place where I can enjoy my later years in peace. A nursing home isn't the worst option. It's not perfect, but it's better than being alone here. You both have your own lives to live, and I don't want to impose on that." And while his words were tinged with a hint of sadness, they were also spoken with a genuine understanding that it was time for his children to follow their own paths, without the weight of his loneliness holding them back. He wanted them to be free, and he also knew that he too deserved to pursue a life that was filled with peace, and also with connection, however that connection might look. It was about choosing a new path with courage, strength, and a deep knowing that he was making the best decision for himself. Their silence spoke volumes, and he could see in their faces that they were beginning to understand the depth of his loneliness, and also his desire to create a future that would be both meaningful and fulfilling, and it was with a shared sense of love and understanding that they finally agreed. "Dad, if this is what you want, we'll respect your choice," Adam promised, his voice now softer, "but we'll visit you often." And with that promise, Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him, knowing that he was not completely alone in this decision, and that he would still have their support and their love, even as he embarked on a new chapter of his life. And so, after much deliberation, consideration, and careful planning, Jack moved into a nursing home in the suburbs. And while it was not the life that he had envisioned, it was a new beginning and a chance to create a future that was more aligned with his present needs. It was a step into the unknown, but it was also a step toward a new chapter, one that was filled with the hope of creating a more peaceful, more connected, and more joyful experience. It was a beautiful place, with flower gardens, activity rooms, and many other seniors who were also at a similar stage of their lives, and while the transition wasn't easy, it was also an opportunity for him to embrace a new environment, to meet new people, and to explore the potential that this new chapter might hold. It was about choosing a path that honored both his needs and also the people that he loved the most. It was about choosing a pathway that was rooted in hope and in also courage. And as he stepped into that new space, he was also taking a leap of faith, believing that he could create a life that was filled with meaning, even in the absence of everything that he had previously known, and that he could, indeed, learn how to navigate this new and unfamiliar environment with strength, grace, and self-assurance. He was choosing to honor his past while also welcoming his future, and he was making the conscious decision to participate fully in the present moment. On his first day, Jack took a walk around the yard, trying to orient himself in this new environment, and to his surprise, he met a long-term resident who went by the name of Mr. Robinson. And Mr. Robinson greeted him with a warm and welcoming smile, and he offered to show Jack around, to familiarize him with the different areas, and to introduce him to some of the other residents. And it was through that simple act of kindness that Jack was then able to settle in with greater ease and with a feeling of being welcomed and accepted. This seemingly small gesture of generosity made the transition so much easier, helping Jack to feel more at home, and helping him to see that there were indeed new connections to be made, and that there was, also, a possibility for community to exist even in this unfamiliar and unknown environment. It was a powerful reminder that even in those most challenging of times, it is human kindness that can help us to find comfort and to help us to create connections with other human beings, and that through that connection, we can find the path to a more joyful and meaningful experience. That night, as Jack lay in his new bed, gazing out the window at the night sky, he felt a strange sense of calm, a feeling that he had made the right choice, and also a sense of acceptance of where his life was now. While it was far from perfect, and while he knew that it was not the life he had originally envisioned for himself, he also knew that it was a new beginning, and that it was also an opportunity to take the lessons from his past and to create a future that was filled with greater peace, understanding, and also purpose. And he was also, for the first time in a long time, feeling a genuine sense of hope, and that even if he was navigating this chapter on his own, he was also surrounded by a new community of people that he could now connect with, and who also understood the challenges that he was now facing. And that was a source of comfort that had been missing in his life for far too long. The first 6 months of Jack's new life flew by surprisingly quickly, and within those months he had found a new routine and also a new rhythm that was both familiar, yet also deeply meaningful. He began to make a point of eating meals regularly, to incorporate consistent exercise into his daily life, and to spend time socializing with the new friends that he was starting to make at the nursing home. And with that, he also realized that the loneliness he had once feared had begun to fade, and that it was being replaced with a new sense of connection and also of purpose. He had found new activities to occupy his time and his energy, and it was in those simple, everyday moments that he was beginning to appreciate the true joys of life. He had started a chess group with the other residents and found that he enjoyed the quiet challenge of that game, while he also enjoyed the deep sense of connection that came with chatting with the people that he was now seeing on a daily basis. He also found solace in the quiet moments when he could reflect, recharge, and find peace within his own company. The days no longer felt like a burden, but rather an opportunity to grow, to explore, and to find joy even in the smallest of ways. And while it was not the life that he had imagined for himself, it was one that he could live with peace, comfort, and also a newfound sense of connection. He began to understand that his purpose was not limited to a particular role or a particular place, and that he was always able to create a life that was both meaningful, fulfilling, and also incredibly rewarding. And within the walls of this nursing home, Jack also came to understand the understated beauty of simple pleasures and the power of those consistent routines that we often take for granted. The daily rhythm of his life, the regular meals, the daily exercise, and the time spent socializing with others had become a source of comfort and joy, and he also began to appreciate how much meaning and purpose he could derive from these seemingly simple acts. He learned to savor the quiet moments, the stillness of the morning, the warmth of the afternoon sun, and the quiet of the evening sky, and he began to appreciate the power of nature and the comfort that it could bring into his life. The simple beauty of the gardens, the gentle breezes, and even the rain on the window became a source of joy and a constant reminder that life was still beautiful, and that even small moments, when savored, could become a powerful and profound experience. And it was in this way that he realized that sometimes it is in the quiet moments and in those simple routines that we find the greatest sense of peace and contentment, and that it is in these moments that we can fully connect with the present and to appreciate all of the beauty that surrounds us. Life is made up of so many small experiences that often go unacknowledged, and it is by focusing on the simple pleasures that we can truly discover the richness of our existence. And as time passed, Jack's life was now filled with a sense of peace, a feeling that he had found a path that was aligned with his goals, and that was also both meaningful and fulfilling, and he began to feel that perhaps he had found a way to move on from the loneliness and to find joy in his new reality. And while he had settled into a new routine and had found new ways of supporting himself, there was still something that remained, that underlying fear that was always waiting in the shadows. And despite all of his new activities, all of the new friendships that he was now building, there was still a gnawing emptiness that sometimes surfaced, a quiet fear that would often grow stronger at night, when he would be laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though he was alone, even when he was surrounded by others. And those same questions, those difficult and often unsettling questions that had followed him, began to resurface in the quiet of his mind. Who will be there for me when I am sick? He would often wonder, and these thoughts would often fill him with a sense of anxiety and would cause him to also question all that he had gained, or if, perhaps, this was just an illusion, a temporary peace that would soon be shattered by yet another challenge that he was being asked to face. And when the fear was the strongest, the questions would feel like a weight on his heart, and he would wonder if he had truly made the right decision, or if he was simply hiding from the inevitable truth that he was still navigating this chapter on his own. And he understood that, while he was no longer completely alone, there was a level of support and a level of love that was still missing from his life, and that no amount of friends or activities could ever truly replace. And he also understood that while he was making an effort to take control of his life, he could not escape the universal human need for human connection and for a deep and abiding sense of support. One afternoon, as Jack was quietly going about his daily routine, enjoying the simple pleasures of his new life, the world that he had so carefully created was suddenly shaken when the phone rang. And as he answered the call, he was greeted by his son Adam's voice, but this was different from all of their previous conversations. This time, Adam's voice was filled with a tremor, and the words he spoke were laced with an urgency and fear that made Jack's heart tighten. "Dad, I've got some bad news," Adam said, his voice barely controlled. "Mrs. Robinson was in a car accident and she's in the hospital." And those words hit Jack like a physical blow, and all of the peace that he had so carefully built over the past several months suddenly began to crumble as a feeling of panic began to rise up from deep within his heart. He was immediately transported back to that same feeling of despair, that deep and terrible sense of dread that he thought he had finally escaped. His heart skipped a beat, and he found himself struggling to breathe, and for a moment he could barely hold the phone in his trembling hand. The image of Mrs. Robinson's warm smile suddenly flashed through his mind, along with the memory of their many conversations and those daily moments of connection that had become such an essential part of his life. And now, all of that was under threat, and all he could think was that he had lost another important person in his life, and he was once again being forced to confront the fragility of existence. It was, in that moment, that Jack realized that even when we are taking action, even when we feel that we have made the best possible choices, that we are still often at the mercy of circumstances that we cannot always control, and that life can be both unpredictable and also incredibly fragile. It was a reminder that we must always value the present moment and appreciate the love, joy, and connection that we are given without taking anything for granted. As Jack struggled to process the gravity of what Adam had just told him, he had to take a moment to steady himself, to remember that he had been through worse, and to also understand that he had to act, that he had to do whatever he could to provide support, and to be present for his new friend, who had meant so much to his overall well-being. He could no longer sit passively. He had to take action and to choose to navigate the unknown with a level of strength and composure that he had not been aware of until just this moment. He hung up the phone and immediately called the nursing home staff to arrange transportation, his mind racing with thoughts and also with a sense of urgency that compelled him to act. And as he waited, he could not help but replay the last time he had seen Mrs. Robinson, when he had so casually smiled and told her to take care of herself, and those words now felt like a burden and a promise that he had not been able to keep. It was like all the joy, peace, and serenity that he had built for himself were now under threat. When he arrived at the hospital, Adam and Emily were standing outside the emergency room, and the look on their faces, so filled with worry and with genuine concern, made the entire situation feel so much more real, and also made the anxiety within Jack feel even more overwhelming. Adam helped him to sit, his own hands trembling slightly, and he could feel how much his children cared for him and also how helpless they were to change the current circumstances. And while they had always offered a level of support, it was at times like this when he felt just how much that support truly meant, even though it also made the current situation feel all the more painful and difficult to navigate. He was not alone, but he was also forced to accept that he was ultimately on his own to manage his deepest fears and his most profound grief. It was a reminder that even with support, you must navigate your own path, with your own strength, and your own unique set of tools that you have gathered along the way. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity, and Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he stared at that red light that was blinking above the surgical room door, and he found himself clinging to a single thread of hope that she would, somehow, find a way to survive. And it was in that moment that he was reminded of just how little control he truly had over the circumstances of his life, and that what truly mattered was how he responded to that uncertainty. And then, finally, the door opened, and the doctor emerged, his face grim and his eyes exhausted, and as he shook his head, Jack felt as though a cold hand had reached down into the very depth of his soul, and he knew from that small and almost imperceptible gesture that he was about to hear some devastating news, and that his life, once again, was about to be changed forever. "The injuries are severe," the doctor said, his voice soft and filled with both sadness and compassion. "Prepare for the worst." And those words hit Jack like a physical blow, leaving him breathless and numb, and he felt as though the floor had dropped out from under him, and he was left to hang suspended in the cold, empty air. His legs felt weak, and as Adam guided him back into his seat, he felt as though he had aged 1,000 years in just a few brief moments. And then, just moments later, a nurse emerged, pushing Mrs. Robinson's still form down the hallway. And as Jack saw her, lying there, pale, unmoving, and a mere shadow of the vibrant woman he had known, his heart lurched, and he reached out instinctively, taking her cold hand in his. He could feel the stark contrast between her once warm and lively presence and the icy grip of her skin, and he knew with a heartbreaking certainty that the world would never be the same again. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling, his tears falling uncontrollably, and his heart overflowing with a sadness that words could not describe. "Please, Mrs. Robinson," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, "please don't leave me." And he felt a moment of hope when her eyes fluttered open and her hand, so small and fragile, reached for his, but in that moment there were no words, only a silent goodbye. Her hand tightened, just for a moment, her breath became shallow and labored, and then, with a final soft exhale, her hand relaxed, and her tired eyes fluttered shut forever. And as she was gone, all that was left was a painful and inevitable silence, and a gaping emptiness that filled the room, and that had also created an unfillable hole in Jack's heart. In the moments after Mrs. Robinson passed away, Jack felt as though his world had truly crumbled, and that a piece of his own soul had been ripped from his body, leaving behind nothing but a hollow shell. He had lost more than just a friend. He had lost the last person who truly cared about him, who saw him for all that he was, and who had loved him without reservation. And now she was gone, and he was once again left to stumble through the days that followed in a daze, shrouded in a darkness that clung to him, and that seemed to smother every chance of peace, hope, or joy. He tried to move on. He tried to continue with the routines that had brought him some comfort, but the grief was suffocating, and it was as if every attempt to find joy only amplified the crushing loneliness that had now taken root deep within him. And he was also aware that there were so many people around him who were attempting to offer comfort, and yet those words often felt hollow and often seemed to amplify the emptiness that he felt. There was no balm that could soothe his wounded heart, and no amount of well-meaning gestures could fill the void that Mrs. Robinson had left behind. It was a pain that he had to navigate on his own, and one that would, ultimately, shape his path moving forward. And he also knew that many people would never truly understand the depth of the pain that he was feeling, and this thought only further contributed to his increasing sense of isolation, that he was not only alone in the world, but he was also alone in his grief, and that he would have to navigate all of these complicated and overwhelming emotions all on his own. It was a truth that he had tried to ignore, but one that he had to now fully embrace, and in the days and weeks that followed, Jack found it increasingly difficult to connect with anyone, and though he was surrounded by friends, family, and his fellow residents at the nursing home, he often felt even more isolated and even more alone than ever before. And it was in those quiet moments, when words seemed to fail, when he was unable to articulate the depth of his feelings, and that he also found an unexpected form of solace. He stopped trying to explain his grief. He stopped trying to find solace in their words, and instead, he began to recognize the beauty and also the power of silence, allowing him to simply be with his thoughts and with his grief without the interference of others' opinions or their well-meaning platitudes. And it was in that silence that he started to hear his own voice, his own truth, and his own ability to navigate this chapter of his life with greater strength and more self-reliance. And on a day when he was feeling particularly heavy, it was then that he saw a new resident, a man whose face was also etched with sorrow, and whose eyes were heavy with the same loneliness that he himself had experienced when he first arrived at the nursing home. And in that moment, he felt a pang of recognition, a shared connection to his pain, and a reminder that even in those most difficult times, we are never truly alone. He walked over to the man slowly, gently placing his hand on his shoulder, offering him the same comfort that he had so desperately longed for himself. "Are you new here?" he asked, his voice soft and filled with a compassion that he had not previously felt. "And would you like to take a walk with me?" And while the man did not speak, his eyes conveyed a deep sense of gratitude and acceptance, and it was then that Jack understood that there was an unspoken language of the heart that was far more powerful than any words could ever be. They walked together, side by side, in the stillness of the garden. Neither of them spoke a word, but they didn't need to, because there was a silent understanding between them, a recognition of the shared weight of their years and their losses, and it was in that shared understanding that they both found a level of comfort and also a shared sense of peace. They were both just two souls, wandering through the final chapters of their lives, finding what comfort they could in the simple act of being present with each other. And that night, as Jack lay in bed, those memories of Mrs. Robinson flooded his mind once more, her voice so soft and kind seeming to echo in the silence of his room, and the memory of her smile and her gentle touch became the most precious moments in his life, and the only things that he now had left of her. But as he closed his eyes, he also realized that even though she was gone, a part of her would always be with him, as she had left her own unique imprint on his heart, a mark that could never be erased. Her love, her care, and her kindness had become a part of his essence, and it was that love that would continue to guide him through the darkest moments of his life. And for the first time in a long while, as he lay there in the quiet, the weight of his loneliness did not feel as heavy as it once had, and it felt as if the pain had softened just a little, and he began to understand that perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough for now. It wasn't an end to his grief, but it was a step towards navigating it with more love and grace. And while Mrs. Robinson's passing had plunged him into a profound sense of sadness. The lessons she had imparted on him during her life would forever remain etched in his heart. She had taught him so much about connection and also about the value of cherishing every single relationship, from those that have been in our lives for many years to those that are brief and fleeting. And she had also shown him that love can take so many different forms, and that each relationship, no matter how big or small, has the capacity to fill the empty spaces within our hearts. She taught him that they are the threads that create the tapestry of our lives, and that it is these connections that make our experiences so much more meaningful, that offer us a sense of understanding and a source of comfort when the world seems overwhelming. And without those relationships, our lives would be so much emptier, and it is these connections that serve as anchors, that ground us, and also remind us of our own unique importance in this world. She taught him that these bonds are a source of strength and a light that shines in the darkness. And when he had finally moved beyond those initial pangs of grief, he came to understand what truly propels us forward, what allows us to keep going, even when life seems like an unrelenting weight. And it is in the depths of those difficult moments that we find an inner strength, a spiritual resilience that is fueled by our love for others and by those deep connections that we have managed to create in our lives. It is not about the absence of pain, it is about choosing to move forward with intention, despite the presence of grief. It was through all of this that he came to realize that it is our shared humanity that will carry us through even the most challenging of times, and it was in those moments of vulnerability that we learn our most precious and profound life lessons. It was also about recognizing that we all have within us a strength that is so powerful and so unique, and that it is this inner power that allows us to navigate the storms of life with courage, and also with an unwavering sense of hope, even when the world feels dark and uncertain. He began to understand that it was this internal strength, fueled by love, by connection, by the wisdom of experience, and also by the recognition that nothing in life is truly permanent, that helps us to not only survive, but also to grow, to learn, and to thrive. And it was through those experiences that he was reminded that there is, within all of us, the capacity to find a sense of peace, a sense of joy, and a deep and abiding source of strength that allows us to navigate all of life's challenges with a greater level of clarity, resilience, and self-assurance. In the end, after all the love, loss, hope, and disappointment that Jack had experienced, he came to understand one very profound truth, that the only way to avoid true failure is to rely upon himself. He began to see that, while it is certainly comforting to have the support of others, and while it is deeply important to build strong relationships and community, there is also a deeper and more profound strength that comes from self-sufficiency, from knowing that in the end, you are the one who will always be there for you. It's not about choosing self-reliance over connection. It's about finding a balance between both, and also about recognizing that, while you may have others who love you, that you must always have your own back. And it is in this journey that we begin to truly grow and to fully understand what it truly means to rely on our own capabilities and to trust in our own unique strength. And when we approach life with this awareness, we can then navigate the various challenges with greater grace, with greater understanding, and also with a powerful sense of inner peace. And also, when the world feels uncertain, and when you have no one else to turn to, you will discover just how strong you truly are. It's not about denying the power of connection or the importance of human love, but it is about accepting the reality that you are the source of your own stability, and that in the end, you must trust your own unique wisdom to guide you through all of life's trials. And that, more than anything else, is the most precious gift you can give to yourself. The great Japanese author Haruki Murakami once wrote, "I always thought that people age slowly. In reality, people don't just age, they age in a moment. In the blink of an eye, a day has passed, a year has ended, and in the blink of an eye, a lifetime has gone by." And those words resonate with a profound truth, and a reminder that we must always live in the present, for all too quickly, our life will be gone. We often feel like we are still young, and we cling to those feelings, but we need to also understand that time is a powerful force, and that it moves forward whether we are paying attention to it or not. And often we do not even realize we are aging until the first gray hairs appear, or when we start to notice the small wrinkles that start to etch themselves into our skin. And then, in a moment of startling realization, we understand that we can no longer deny that we are, in fact, getting older. Time slips by almost unnoticed, and it is only in those moments when we pause to reflect that we realize just how much time has already slipped away, as we suddenly find ourselves standing at a point in our lives where we can no longer deny that we have crossed a threshold, where we have moved from youth to what lies beyond. We have moved past a certain point, and that will forever change the way that we perceive ourselves and the world around us. And as you grow older, you also understand the weight of time, the feeling that it is a force that is beyond your control, and that it often moves at a pace that may be unsettling, particularly when you feel as though you have so much more that you would like to achieve. It is in those moments that we often need to surrender to the flow of life and to accept that there are elements that are simply beyond our control, and that we can find more peace when we learn how to simply be and to honor the current moment, whatever that may bring. As you continue this journey, you may also find that the noise of the world grows quieter, and that it is no longer something that draws you in, and that this silence is not an indication that you have less to say, but perhaps that there is nothing more that needs to be said. You may find that people around you, though they may want to understand, are often unable to truly hear the depths of your soul, and that you can only ever be fully understood by yourself. And in those moments when the noise of the world starts to quiet, it is then that you can begin to hear the whispers of your own heart, and to take that time to tune into all that is happening deep within you. It is in the silence that you can truly connect to your deepest self and allow yourself to hear all that it is trying to communicate to you. And it is also in those moments that you begin to prioritize your own feelings, your own emotions, and your own unique wisdom that will help guide you forward. Sometimes, instead of filling those moments with empty words, it is okay to simply embrace the silence, as that is often the most valuable tool that we have available to us. It is a practice that allows us to take a breath, to reflect, to understand, and to integrate all that has passed, so that we can become fully present in our current moment and to make informed choices about the future. The silence then becomes a sacred space where we can learn, we can grow, and we can fully connect with our true selves. It's also important to acknowledge that adversity will always be more prevalent than any perceived advantage, and that life is full of struggles, and that, at times, it may feel as though failure is the only possible outcome. And it is through these struggles that we truly learn and grow, as we begin to understand that there are so many forces in this world that are truly beyond our control, and also that accepting this fact is a pathway towards peace. But as we work through these difficult moments, we can also choose to focus on how we approach the situation, and that while we may not be able to change the outcome, we can choose to take responsibility for our own actions, and to know that, in the end, as long as we have given our best effort, that we can hold our heads high, free from any sense of shame or regret. And it is in those moments that we realize that self-respect is not something we earn, but rather something that we are always worthy of, no matter what. This self-respect is not one of arrogance or pride, but rather one of humility, and it is in that understanding of our own limitations that we also discover the power of our own inherent value, and also the beauty that can be found in self-compassion. We start to recognize that it is in our vulnerability that we also find our greatest strengths, and also that we can begin to approach each and every challenge with greater grace, compassion, and a more realistic understanding of our own inherent and unlimited potential. And as time marches forward, you will also begin to feel that change, that quiet and subtle transformation that is happening within you. And as the world around you continues to evolve, one thing will always remain clear. You have also changed, that your life has also shifted in significant ways, and that, through all of that growth, you have become more than you could ever have imagined. And it is in this understanding that you find true freedom, joy, and an authentic sense of self. Your experiences, all of them, the struggles, the joys, and also the losses, they have all shaped you into the beautiful, unique, and powerful being that you have become. And now it is time to acknowledge the journey you have walked, the challenges you have overcome, and the beautiful tapestry of memories that make up your life, and that give it its profound meaning. It is a reminder that each and every one of us is a masterpiece, a truly one-of-a-kind story, and that we must honor and celebrate all of the different parts that make up who we truly are. You have changed, and you have grown, and you have also learned so much, and these are all markers of the profound and powerful transformation that you have all experienced over time. You are not the same person that you were, and your life is no longer the same as it was, and this is all a testament to your strength, your resilience, and your unique ability to navigate change with courage, hope, and with grace. And it is also a reminder that the journey is always ongoing, and that you have the tools to navigate it with intention and with all that you have learned along the way. Through the many trials and tribulations of life, Jack came to understand one very profound truth, that love itself can often take a myriad of different forms, and that, just as we change, so too will the ways that we give and receive love in our lives, and it is in this acceptance that we discover freedom and peace. And that while he once thought love was simple, and that it would always remain unchanged, the reality is that it is both fluid and complex. It is ever-changing and morphing to meet the unique needs of every moment and of every person who experiences it. He had once thought that love was an anchor that would keep him grounded, that would never let him go, and that it was a force that would help him to navigate any and all challenges. But as the years unfolded, he came to see that many relationships are in fact fleeting, that are like the petals of a flower that bloom brightly for a short time and then fade all too quickly. And these relationships, these experiences of love, are often more about the moments that we share than about the promise of forever, and it is by accepting this that we can also begin to fully appreciate those beautiful moments for what they are. Life often moves so swiftly that the past, present, and future begin to blur together, and it is then that we realize, with a quiet ache, that people who once felt so irreplaceable, those who seem to be the very foundation of our world, may either change or simply drift away, and we are then left to navigate the changing tide all on our own. And even those most cherished memories, once so vibrant and full of life, will slowly start to fade as time marches on, and it is then that we must learn to let go and to accept all that was and all that is and also all that will be. And it is by accepting the impermanence of life that you learn to cherish the present moment and also to accept that life, in all its complexity, can be both a source of great joy and also great sorrow, and that this balance is what it means to live a full and authentic life. It is both beautiful and it is also, sometimes, incredibly difficult. But it is through all of these various experiences that we ultimately grow, we learn, and we come to discover who we are, what we value, and also what we have the capacity to become. And it is finally by embracing those bittersweet truths that we learn that the only way to avoid true failure is to ultimately rely on our own inner strength, to connect to our own powerful self-reliance, and to know that in the end, you will always be there for yourself, and that in those moments when the world is most uncertain, or when you have no one else to turn to, you will then discover just how strong you truly are. It is not about denying the power of connection, but it is about finding the strength within yourself to keep moving forward with hope, with intention, and with grace. And that is the most precious gift that you can give to yourself. And so, after all of this exploration, and after all of these life lessons that we have uncovered through Jack's story, I want to invite you to think deeply about what you have learned today, and to consider how these insights can help you to navigate your own unique journey through life. We have spoken about love, loss, hope, resilience, and also the incredible strength that lies within us all. We have also explored the importance of self-reliance and also the power of human connection. And I want you to take a moment to consider what has resonated most strongly with you. What specific lesson from Jack's story will you carry with you moving forward? And how will you transform that knowledge into actionable steps in your own life? It's about taking what we have learned today and making it our own, allowing it to influence our present choices and to guide us towards a future that is filled with intention, with meaning, and with a deep and abiding sense of self-acceptance. It is about taking those seeds of knowledge and planting them in our lives so that we can grow stronger, wiser, and more in tune with what our hearts and our souls are asking for. It is also about taking responsibility for creating the life that you truly desire, and it is also about remembering that we are all on this journey together and that we can always learn and grow from the wisdom of others. And when we share our stories, we can also begin to create a better world for all of those who will come after us. So, let's share. Please take a moment to share in the comments below what is the one most important lesson that you have learned from this video, and how will it help to influence your actions moving forward? And I want to emphasize that you should be fully honest, as whatever you are feeling is always valid, and we are all here to offer support, care, and a sense of shared understanding. There is no judgment, only compassion. By sharing your thoughts, your insights, and your own unique perspectives, you will not only be helping yourself, but you will also be helping others who are on a similar journey and who are also looking for connection, support, and guidance along the way. Your stories and your experiences are not just your own, but they are also a powerful tool for transformation that you can offer to the world, and it is in the sharing that we all grow stronger and wiser. And you never know whose life you may touch with your words, and by sharing your experiences, you may also help others to discover a path towards greater peace and a deeper sense of well-being as they are also learning and growing at their own pace. It's about building a community, and it is about connecting with those who share your values and also your desire to live a more fulfilling, more authentic, and more joyful life. And as we reach the end of this exploration, and as we take stock of all that we have discovered together, I also want to take this moment to invite you to not only share your thoughts, but to also take action and to continue exploring, learning, and growing as you continue on your own journey. For this is not the end of your story, it is only the beginning, and it is now up to you to apply these new insights and to transform them into action in your everyday life. And this is also an invitation for you to subscribe to our channel so that you can continue to receive valuable advice, support, and inspiration as you continue on your own unique path and as you seek to create a life that is aligned with your deepest values, your highest intentions, and also with your most profound hopes and dreams. You are not alone, and you do not have to navigate these challenges on your own, as you have a community of support that is here to help you every step of the way. And if you have found this video to be helpful, I also ask that you take a moment to give it a like and to also share it with others who you feel may also benefit from these valuable life lessons. And by sharing, you are also helping me to continue creating content that is both meaningful and also empowering, and that honors the lives and experiences of all seniors as we navigate this beautiful and often challenging journey of aging. Together, we can create a world where we are all valued, respected, and supported, no matter what challenges we may be facing. And finally, I want to thank you for being here today, for joining me on this journey, and for also choosing to take this step towards a greater level of self-awareness, and also a deeper connection with your own unique strength, and also your own inner wisdom. And it is my greatest hope that you will now walk away feeling both more empowered and also more inspired to continue creating a life that is full of joy, fulfillment, and a deep and abiding sense of peace. Remember that you have the power within you, that you are capable of incredible resilience, and that you are not alone in this journey, as you are surrounded by a community of like-minded individuals who are all also committed to living their lives to their fullest potential. The future is yours to create, and I wish you all the very best as you continue this amazing journey of life.